The story of Job. Why does God allow suffering? Suffering is a reality we all face. It touches every life, every heart, and every soul at some point. And yet, despite its universality, it remains one of the most perplexing and often painful questions of human existence. Why does God allow suffering? In today's video, we will dive into one of the most powerful and inspiring stories from the Bible, the story of Job. It's a profound reflection on suffering, faith, and the greater purposes of God. Through Job's trials, we'll find lessons not only in enduring pain but also in discovering the potential for growth, wisdom, and restoration. Let this be a journey of hope, healing, and deeper understanding for all of us who have ever asked, why me? Why this? Why now? Job's story begins with immense blessings. He is described in the Bible as a man of great integrity, deeply devoted to God. Job is wealthy, with plentiful livestock, numerous servants, and a large family he dearly loves. His life appears perfect, filled with favor, prosperity, and peace. But what makes Job truly remarkable is not his external blessings, it's his unwavering faith in God. He is a model of righteousness, not because of what he has, but because of who he is. He consistently honors God, even offering sacrifices to intercede for his children, showing his devotion as not just religious but deeply personal. Into this context comes an unseen challenge. The Bible describes a celestial discussion between God and Satan, where Satan questions the authenticity of Job's faith. He implies that Job's righteousness is self-serving, suggesting that Job worships God only because of his blessings. If those blessings were removed, would Job remain faithful? God allows Satan to test Job but places limits. Satan may take everything from Job, but he cannot take his life. This sets the stage for one of the most profound lessons on faith and suffering. In a single devastating series of events, Job's life is turned upside down. He loses everything. One by one, messengers arrive with heartbreaking news. His livestock is stolen, his servants are killed, and a natural disaster takes the lives of his beloved children. If that weren't enough, Job is afflicted with a terrible disease, his body covered in painful sores. The magnitude of his suffering is unimaginable. Job, once surrounded by wealth and family, is left in physical agony, emotional devastation, and utter isolation. He sits in ashes, scraping himself with pottery to find some relief, a heartbreaking image of a man brought to the depths of despair. And yet, even in this immense suffering, Job does something remarkable. He mourns his losses, tears his robe, shaves his head, but then he falls to the ground and worships. Job utters these words: "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord." Job refuses to curse God, even though his soul is engulfed by pain. Like many of us, Job cannot help but wrestle with his situation. His faith is strong, but his humanity is real. He asks the hard questions: why am I suffering? What is the purpose of this pain? For Job, it is not the loss of possessions or even his health that weighs heaviest, it is the silence of God. He longs to understand his suffering but receives no answer. He begins to lament, pouring out his anguish in raw, heartfelt expressions. He even curses the day of his birth, questioning why he was ever brought into existence. Yet, even as Job vents his sorrow, he never turns away from God. Instead, his cries are directed to the one he still believes has the answers. This tension, between pain and faith, between doubt and trust, is what makes Job's story so relatable. It mirrors the inner turmoil we all face when life's hardships feel unbearable. In the midst of his suffering, Job is visited by 3 friends. At first, they sit silently with him in solidarity, a powerful reflection of compassion. But then they start to offer explanations for his suffering. Their opinions are based on a common but flawed belief that suffering must be the result of sin. They insist that Joe must have done something wrong to deserve such punishment. Joe, however, knows his heart. He knows he has not committed some great sin to warrant this pain. He rejects their simplistic reasoning and defends his innocence. This part of the story highlights an important truth: human reasoning often falls short in explaining suffering. Joe's friends, though well-intentioned, fail to understand the greater spiritual dynamics at play. Their attempts to provide answers only deepen Joe's pain and isolation. The climax of Joe's story comes when God Himself responds to Joe's cries. But instead of offering direct answers, God reveals something greater: His power, wisdom, and sovereignty over all creation. Through a series of rhetorical questions, God reminds Joe of the vastness of creation, the stars, the oceans, the animals, and the intricate care with which He governs every detail. The message is clear: God's knowledge is infinite, while human understanding is limited. God does not explain why Joe suffered, but He reveals something far more important: that He is in control, even when we cannot see or understand His purposes. In this encounter, Joe's perspective shifts. He stops asking why and starts trusting who. Who is God? He is a loving, wise, and sovereign Creator who holds all things, even our pain, in His hands. Joe responds with humility and reverence, saying, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." His suffering leads him to a deeper, more personal encounter with God. After this transformative encounter, God restores Joe's fortunes. His health is renewed, his wealth is doubled, and he is blessed with a new family. Joe's latter days are even greater than his former ones. Yet, it's important to note that Joe's restoration is not the reward for his suffering. Rather, it is a reflection of God's grace and faithfulness. Even if Joe had not been restored, his faith in God would have remained. His journey was not about material restoration but about spiritual transformation. Through suffering, Joe's character was refined, his faith deepened, and his relationship with God became more intimate. So, what can we take away from Joe's story as spiritual seekers? First, Joe teaches us that it is okay to ask questions and wrestle with God in our pain. Faith is not the absence of doubt but the decision to trust God in the midst of it. Like Joe, we can bring our raw emotions to God, knowing that He hears and cares. Second, the story reminds us that suffering is not always a punishment. Sometimes, it is a part of a greater plan that we cannot yet see. Joe's trials were not about punishment but about revealing God's glory and purposes. Third, Joe challenges us to shift our focus from why to who. Instead of trying to understand everything, we are called to trust the one who holds everything. Finally, Joe's story offers hope. It shows us that no matter how deep our pain, restoration is possible. God does not abandon us in our suffering but walks with us through it, molding us for a greater purpose. The story of Joe is not just about suffering, it is about faith, endurance, and the transformative power of trusting God. It teaches us that while we may not always understand the reasons for our pain, we can trust the one who does. Joe's life reminds us that suffering is not the end of the story. Beyond the darkness, there is light. Beyond the pain, there is restoration. And beyond the questions, there is a God who loves us and holds us in His hands. So, wherever you are in your journey, take heart. Your suffering is not meaningless. It is an opportunity to grow, to trust, and to encounter God in a new and deeper way. Remember, the Lord who gave and took away in Joe's story is still present in our lives today, working all things together for a purpose far greater than we could ever imagine. Blessed be the name of the Lord.